This week, it's a Flight Time Book Club special with the legendary Barry Ord Clarke, aka the Featherbender. Barry's new book, Advanced Flight Time Techniques, has just been released and is a must-read for anyone looking to develop their flight time skills. We spoke to Barry about his incredible flight time career, his hugely successful YouTube channel, and his unusual introduction to learning to tie flies. But first, Tom, the season is open on Carb and on many waters around the country, and the excitement is high.
Good man, Dara.
I'm
Man,
selling it. I'm selling it here.
yeah, so I have nothing to report. It's okay. I didn't get out, but like I didn't miss much. It was tough up here in Doors, Carnamona. The lake itself was poor, even for the guys who were trolling the Burkeen. A couple of good. I heard one boat had five. But to be honest, yeah, I know the boats up here. There was two boats out from my place. Mike Shanks was out, Kevin Carrigan, Paddy Caneva was out, and nothing to report. Now they were all casting. Now the only thing is, and one of the reasons I couldn't go was a lot for doing to get into, but a lot of the opening day isn't really fishing. We've a hut in the island, and I know like the guys were in the hut for about 2 or 3 hours, and it's just nice to get out again. I can see the hut from where I am. I was looking out because I was working, and most times there was about 4 or 5 boats there.
Can
So
I make a point? It's not just opening day where many hours are spent. In my
you've been in
experience,
that hut.
you
You
could be
have
in the
been in
height.
that hut.
You could be in the height of the season. It doesn't matter.
Mm.
There's as much crack to be had there now.
No, it is really great, and that's part of it. It's just going out, sitting down, meeting people you haven't met for ages. I always say this: there's just more to it than just
Yeah,
actually throwing a line. But no, I had so much for doing. I was 12 days without power here, like a lot of
yeah.
other places in the country, which meant I don't actually have my Macalin, the boat ready, so I had to be getting it ready. Um, and then I knew if I went out, I'd be 3 or 4 hours sitting in a hut thinking to myself, I should be, making sure the engine's on, everything like that. So, yeah, that was my excuse anyway. But so I didn't get on, and then the power gone, and then like the weekend beforehand, where I'd normally get things ready, I was actually at the Italian Fly Fair where I met, and that's where met with Barry. No, Barry was coming on
Yes.
anyway. It was great to meet him beforehand, and he was at that. So yeah, I just haven't been able to get up to it. Water temperature is very cold.
Yeah, it is,
From
isn't
what
it?
it is very cold. We're having a cold spell now. Now, this is very interesting because I'm chatting to a lot of people. What happened here now is people have all my bookings are in now up until June. So guys are going, all right, am I going to hit the Mayfly? Am I going, then you're looking at last year. We had Mayfly up here at the end of April last year. But if you look at last winter was very mild. Now we've had I wouldn't say a freezing cold winter, but we've had a colder winter. So at the moment, I'm putting all my chips. I'm going all in on probably the second week in May. But look, we'll see.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's kind of more normal conditions, you'd kind of argue, would
It
you?
is
Like,
actually.
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
saying last year, I don't know, I think I said it on this, but I didn't clear, I didn't have to clear frost off the car any morning last year. The one that was a slight bit. Like there's been a few mornings here uh, that have been kind of, woo, geez, want to be careful driving. So plenty of cold weather. So yeah, as you say, it's been more of a normal one.
When are you hoping to get out yourself?
Hoping to get out this Sunday now, but looking at the weather, don't think I will.
A lot of rain covering it
Yeah, a
coming.
lot of rain. Lake is going up a bit as well. So yeah, I think it's if I don't get out this Sunday because I'm doing a bit on the road, I'm up at Enniskill on Saturday on a show. Uh, so I'm at fishing tackle and bait show there, so I won't get out Saturday. But I don't think Saturday's the day anyway. Also, as well, I think Saturday's fairly windy. Any thoughts of you getting out? Remember last year you said you were going to. Remember last year you were going to go because we had Dave on, and we're Dave O'Donovan, and he was talking about the function.
Yes, I haven't. No, it's funny actually. I am looking at doing a bit of. Well, I like to always try and get out to the Blackwater, which opens in February because it's just down the road for me. Just haven't had a chance.
Oh shit, that's
Just
right. The Blackwater does open in February.
February the
Yeah, it's
first.
the shore. It's the shore beside you is what the 17th of
Sure,
March.
17th March. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd
You
always
got
try
the
and get out to,
Blackwater.
I'd always try and get out to the Blackwater just to, cast her up. But the river's been too high. I was in contact with Noel and Glenda like the last 2 weeks, and it was just the
Yeah.
river was too high, couldn't get near it. So it'll be interesting to see with these rains how that plays out. I am looking at doing a bit of spring salmon fishing on the Slaney. Somebody was in contact about that.
Oh,
So
cool. Excellent.
I've never fished the Slaney.
Yeah.
It's kind of, isn't it? It's kind of the marker, I think, in the season. You get out to do a bit of spring salmon. Now the chances, but just to be able to kind of mark the card and say, yeah, did a bit of spring salmon on the Slaney. So I'm looking forward to that now. I think that'll be kind of April time anyway. But look,
Yeah,
I
because
do.
I think it has gone even then we were saying last year, it has been pushed further back
Yeah,
what runs they are having. Oh, that's
exactly.
gonna be class. Oh yeah.
Need to dust down the casting skills between now
Yeah.
and then anyway. So, but look, it's kind of when it's cold and windy and rainy, you're kind of like, oh Jesus. I mean, I'm just getting old, so I'm just like, I'll give it another week. I'll give it
Yeah, we're
another
all getting
week.
on.
That's it. Oh, so
Oh God.
anyway, look, we get back to this week's guest, Barry Ord Clarke, the well-known fly tyer, and we spoke to Barry about his new book, Advanced Fly Tying Techniques.
In the last 30 years since I've lived in Norway, I've tried to produce a book every 2 years. So I'm on book 17 now on fly tying. But a lot of them, five or six of them have been in Norwegian. But the most recent ones, there was always something that I couldn't find in fly tying books, especially for people that were learning. I mean, when I started tying flies, I had one book, and I didn't get that right at the beginning. So, and there was no internet. There was no. I didn't really. I wasn't in any kind of fly tying uh,
Oh,
environment. Um, but fortunately, I met this Scottish fella at a book fair in Notting Hill when I lived in London, and he was selling fully dressed classic salmon flies, and I'd been a course fisherman more or less all my life, except for the years I was in London where other things took my time. Um, but I was just absolutely fascinated by these fully dressed salmon flies, uh, and of course, really Victorian. And I had
Sorry, Barry, just on that, had you been doing salmon fishing at that stage?
absolutely nothing,
Wow. So it was just
no.
the aesthetic of it, was it?
just the aesthetics. But I had a classic uh, arts and crafts education at art school where I learned calligraphy, life drawing every day, painting, uh, ceramics, stained glass, bookbinding. So all those classic William Morris arts and crafts, and these classic salmon flies that I didn't even know what they were. I could see that they were on a fishing hook.
But it's funny, you immediately recognize, God, this is another art form.
Yes,
Yeah.
immediately. I mean,
Yeah.
I could see that it was a serious craft. And I got talking with this fella, and he told me that he'd made all the flies, he'd tied them all himself, and he had some stuffed fish that he'd done himself on this boot sale that he was selling. We got talking, and I told him I was an advertising photographer, and he needed a booklet doing to sell his flies and his stuffed fish. Uh, and how much would that cost him if I did it for him? And I said, I'll tell you what, if you learn me how to tie these flies, uh, we can do an exchange. So he came round every Thursday night. He brought all the gear, all the materials. We tied 37 classic fully dressed salmon flies.
Very much throwing you in at the deep end, Barry.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
right.
I didn't. You see, that's what
Yeah. I would have
didn't
got
affect
offended
me at
telling
all
him
because I
myself,
didn't see
but
it as
anyway,
a
sorry.
deep end
Yeah.
because I knew nothing about it. And it was all, I mean, it was all the classic stuff. I mean, like Durham Ranger and Golden Eagle and Lady Amherst. All that stuff. Evening Star, and he had all the gear, so I didn't have to. I did, and he taught me how to.
So when you actually went back to tying the hairs of your nephews, thought, God, this is a
Well,
doddle.
I'll tell you what, that was very difficult for me because at that time, I never even fly fished.
Wow.
So I learned to tie fully dressed salmon flies before I'd even ever held a fly rod. And when I started fishing, I bought uh, a rod with a mate because we couldn't afford one together, one each. So we bought one together, and it didn't take us more than like 3 hours until one of us, we can't remember who it was, but one of us had bought the other one out. We were sat around waiting for somebody to finish casting, and then we wanted to go. So it was, I have to show you something. There it is.
Oh, oh
Ah,
my God.
There's the first rod.
Oh
uh,
my God.
yeah,
And
that's not a cork handle, is it?
no, it's not. It's not a cork handle. It was, me and my mate bought it together. Uh, it eventually went over to my mate, and then it went to his dad, who actually had a heart attack landing a fish on it. And last year, he found it in his dad's garage, and he had it framed and sent to me.
Wow.
Ah,
That's absolutely. I have that in my tying room now.
Oh,
that's
wow.
class.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. Oh, that's a real. How many years ago was that, Barry? Do you mind me asking?
That's early 80s.
Wow.
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 Yeah, it's
That's
a long time ago now. I don't feel it's a long time ago, but
so. Did you get into the fly fishing side of it because of the fly tying?
well, always been uh, when from a very early age I was a absolutely crazy course fisherman. But for absolute anything, canals, mill lodges. But I used to love it. I used to get on the bus when I lived in Burnley. I'd get up early on a Sunday morning, pack my gear on the Saturday night, get on the bus to a place called Lower House Lodge, and I'd sit there all day on my own at like 9 years old, and fish perch and gudgeon and roach and anything that I could catch. I remember the first fish I ever caught was a perch, and I put it in a salt. The only thing I could take it home in was a salt and vinegar crisp packet, and I put it in that and took it home. When I took it out to show me dad, it was all covered in crumbs and bits of crisps. But yeah, I still remember that. Oh, that first fish.
Was fly fishing available, or was
Oh
it something?
no,
Yeah, was
No.
something distant.
absolutely not. But I remember my older brother lived in Derbyshire, in Bakewell, and we were visiting him once, and me and my father were on the banks of the River Wye in Bakewell, and we saw a fella fly fishing. We saw him take his fly out, and he took a tin of spray from his pocket and he sprayed his fly. And I asked my dad what he was doing. And my father wasn't really sure about what he was doing, but he said he's fly fishing. So that was my first ever encounter with fly fishing, and I think I must have been about 10.
But it obviously stayed with you, between the art college and you saw the salmon flies. There was obviously something latent there that was always going to draw you in, wasn't it?
Absolutely, I've never actually thought about it like that, but I was that period where I lived in London as an advertising photographer. I was working with a lot of rock bands uh, and fashion and everything else, and fishing just disappeared for many years. But of course, like you say, there must have been still something there.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
and I've
It
always
never
been
it never
an
leaves you.
outdoors.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think, and a lot of people have that window, from when they start fishing at a young age. And then there is that window. And for some people, it lasts a long time. Some people, it's only a couple of years. With me, it was just the years I was in college. And straight away
Yeah,
back when I moved back here, and I think I was 23, 24 when I got into it again. But it's still there and it will come back to you.
So come here, tell us, Barry, that in terms of, so you decided to start tying flies with the classic salmon flies, which I'm
That's great. I love that.
actually just on that. Would you recommend that as a learn? as a learning technique.
It was, I only saw it as having that arts and crafts education. It was just a craft.
Yeah.
I had nothing to, the only thing I had to compare what I was doing with it was this fella's Gary's flies, who was teaching me how to tie them. I'd never seen them before in a book or anywhere. Not that I can remember. So I had nothing to compare them to, and I had no goals or expectations of how good they had to be.
Did you struggle with any of the techniques, or because you had that arts and crafts training, did it just come
No,
naturally to you?
I don't think I did. I think the thing I struggled with probably most was applying seals for dubbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. But other than that, marrying wings and mounting other materials, but probably struggled with finishing off at the head, getting a nice, neat head to begin with, anyway. But after I'd tied 30 odd of them, it was done. But when I started fishing and I went on to trout flies, I had nothing to show me uh, how to tie them. So I had to buy them and dissect them, like
Yeah.
forensically
Yeah. And
take
to
them
look at them,
apart.
mind
And
you, I also think you probably had nothing to fear about tying them either after tying fully dressed salmon flies.
well, they were pretty scruffy in respect to
Comparison.
what
Yeah.
I've been doing.
And
Uh,
come here, was there a window or was there a period then? So you learned in at the deep end, as we say, and that was in London, wasn't it?
yes.
The salmon flies. Then did you stop or did you go straight into fishing from that? Or was there a period where you stopped everything and then you said, oh, I must try now that I'm fishing again, I'll have to start trying trout flies.
Well, we went on to it. I spoke to my oldest mate about this, and I showed him the flies, and he'd also been a course fisherman. So we just said, we'll have to give it a go. So we bought the rod together, and then the next thing was to tie the flies together, And he started tying flies, which quite quickly all his gear ended up in the loft with his windsurfer and his golfing equipment. But I carried on, and that was it. I've been doing it ever since. And I started with like reel and just like with cotton from a, a sewing box and stuff like that. But then my mother-in-law bought me my first fly tying kit that came in a little plastic box. I'll never forget it because when I opened it, the top had come off the varnish and gone over the whole lot in the plastic box. But I managed to salvage a Sunrise double A vice and
Yeah.
basic materials. And most of them were absolutely things that I'd seen and I'd used in classic salmon flies, but I don't think I've ever used any of them ever again in a trout fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, golden pheasant and all kinds of stuff in there. There was even some ibis in there.
What is it that just drew you in? I know it's probably the same as trying to just explain why somebody's into fishing, but what is it possible to put into words how it consumed you and took over for you?
I think one of the greatest attractions was the materials.
Okay.
I've always been a daft bird watcher, and I've always collected feathers, bones, anything that's natural that is unusual. I used to frighten the life out of my mates when I was young. They all had pictures of Dennis Law and Georgie Best on their bedroom walls, and Clint Eastwood, and I had loads of dead stuff nailed to me walls, birds' wings. I used to be a egg collector when I was a young lad, and I had a magnificent collection of eggs, like 600.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
but it became illegal, if I remember correctly, in like mid 70s. And I donated them all to the RSPB. So whatever happened to them, I don't know. But I wouldn't do that again now. I was young and bird egg collecting then was all right for young lads.
funny how things change, Barry. It was considered grand and it was considered part of, admiring nature by collecting eggs. And I suppose it's our perceptions and everything, the norms change as we go further. And it would like, I didn't realize it was since the mid 70s, but yeah, it's just completely changed and it'd be fucking frowned upon. Well, it's
Oh,
completely illegal
absolutely.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there was a couple of fellas in Norway just before Christmas. They were caught with 30,000 eggs. 30,000. Two fellas, two different locations, but they were both known to each other. They were both mates, and they got raided by the environmental department of
Wow.
police, and they were caught with over 30,000 eggs in their collection.
And were these collectors or were these guys selling them on?
They were collectors.
Oh, wow.
And when I was a kid, we only ever took one egg from a nest.
Yeah.
But I was there. I again coming back to those materials. I from like being as young as I can remember, I collected birds' feathers and wings and skins. I used to skin mice and moles and stuff that I caught. Uh, so that side of natural materials, I have tons of stuff here at home in cases, like beetles, anything that I found while I've been fishing and hunting, bear skulls, wolf skulls, beetles,
Yeah.
butterflies, all that kind of stuff.
Were you unusual with your friends in that sense? Like, 'cause obviously, kids were more into nature, 50 years ago, whatever it was. But were you even unusual for your kids that you were
Yeah, I
so
was a
obsessed
bit
with it?
weird. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
collecting all that. But my father was like that as well.
Okay.
He loved all that stuff out being outdoors.
Did your dad fish or anything?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
did
so
picked
he
up a bit
taught
of
me.
fishing with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find it hard then, London life, Barry? Or had you kind of left that nature stuff behind and decided you had to become an adult and grown up and
Well, the age I was when I lived in London for 13, 14 years. And at the age I was then in my 20s, London was a great place.
yeah, a different phase, I suppose, yeah.
It was a fantastic place. But I moved to Norway. It'll be 31 years ago this year.
What was the reason for the move to Norway?
It's a long story, but I can tell it short. Our daughter was born in London. We had a flat, and I rented a studio in Westbourne Park in London. And so we decided, my wife was pregnant with our second child, and we decided we'd sell the flat, get rid of the studio, and look for somewhere I could have a studio at home and another bedroom for the baby to come. And so we were looking in London, we were active. And on a Friday afternoon, I went to get my daughter from nursery, and we'd just come in the door. It was like 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. We'd just come in the front door, and I was opening up our flat door, and I heard a shot. So I went to the door, I opened the door, and a 17-year-old boy was dead on our doorstep with a hole in his forehead. And we had literally just 30 seconds before come in to the house. So the next day, my wife and daughter moved to Norway. She's Norwegian. They took a flat to Norway. Took me 2 days to pack everything up. I rented out our apartment, and I moved to Norway 2 days later.
That was it. Enough was enough. Like.
That was it. So, and it's brilliant. And it was a coincidence that my father-in-law was the forest manager for the largest private estate in Norway. So I had loads of fishing, loads of hunting.
And was it the photography work you kept going with that?
Well, I tried to do that. I was working with rock bands in the UK. And when I got to Norway, the only rock band here was Ha Ha, and they lived in London.
Pretty big though.
Yeah, but they lived in London, and because of my liking of the outdoors and fishing and hunting, I was easy for me to see that there was a substantial amount of fishing and hunting magazines here with absolutely dire photography.
Okay.
Right.
So I totally changed everything around and started doing hunting and fishing photography. Then I started making fly tying articles, step by steps for magazines.
That stage, that development into the kind of the fishing and hunting then kind of drew you more into that fishing world then, did it really?
Sure, yeah. I was working for magazines at the top of the magazine world. I was writing 20 odd articles a month,
Right.
going
Wow.
all over the world. And about 8 years ago, I could see all these magazines collapsing and disappearing, and that's why I started looking at more of the digital world.
Yeah, because like, and in fairness, when you see people like yourself David McPhail, who've embraced the digital early on and consistently put up good content on a consistent basis, you can see the size of the following, can't you? Like in terms of how it's grown over time. It's almost like a community of friends, is it, that are kind of following you and
Sure, and a lot of the people that follow you, they actually believe that they know you.
yeah,
But I understand that in a way, and that's what's good about doing all the shows that I do. Is I
Yeah.
get to meet these people that have been watching my videos for. I think I've been doing it now for 8 years.
you obviously enjoy it, Barry, do you?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
But I suppose even then coming from the photographic background, then I suppose was the setup, the lighting that wasn't as kind of onerous or as daunting for you to get set up.
No, especially the stills photography for the article,
Mm.
dead easy for me.
Yeah.
But at the time when I started, all the uh, tying videos were done from the other side of the vice, from the wrong side, so not as a point of view.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it as a point of view, and that was a bit difficult to get around. But now that I've done, I don't know, I think yeah, it's over 500 videos. That way, it's become just a natural.
Yeah. And we'll talk about, because when we go into the book, we'll talk about that. But I think it's just looking at it, it's great that the stills you have, the still shots are from that angle, and you've done so well. You can see because I think it's really important as a fly tire that you're looking at something the same angle that you're tying it from, you know?
Sure.
Um, yeah, it's a simple thing, but it holds
Yeah.
very true, you know?
Well, going on to the new books, the last 4 books I've done, when you look at it, when you're learning fly tying from a book, and you've got step by step images, there's always something from step 2 to 3. Something happens that you don't see. The person who is learning fly tying from the book, there is something happens. Like you've got a piece of you've got hackle in your hand, showing you how to prepare the hackle. And then the next image, the hackle's tied in.
Yeah. And there's a gap. There's a big
There's a
gap.
gap.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was close that gap.
Mm.
And that's when I decided that maybe a good thing would to be doing the QR codes
Yeah.
so they can see the video and actually see what happens and then go back to the book.
Yeah, it's fantastic because then you can work with both mediums there and then.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah, it
absolutely.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, no, and I've been doing it and checking out how it works. And I think it's just really good. And for anybody out there who hasn't tried this method, it's really worthwhile doing it. It really is because yeah, I
Sure.
mean, there's one thing about pausing a video when you're looking at it, but the, actually looking at it on the book, what you want. Sometimes maybe I'm old school, but I still love books as well. And
Oh,
you know,
absolutely. I wouldn't have made 16 of them if I didn't.
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Well, what stage did your career change? Did it become a focus purely on the fly tying and developing the digital side, or like is this your full time? Is this what you're doing full time? Just doing all the
Absolutely.
yeah.
Mm.
So was that a conscious decision? You said, you know what, I could do something with this here.
Well, it wasn't. it eventually became a conscious decision.
Hmm.
It just slowly grew and grew and grew, and I didn't have time for anything else. So it just I just kind of morphed into it.
Well, also as well, and I know from doing articles, if you were doing that amount of articles a month,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of time for other things really, because it's kind of time consuming,
Of
and
course, and I
and you
was
were doing the photography as well. So
yes, all the photography for the
yeah,
articles, and I was also tying flies professionally. So I was tying,
right.
and there was one shop here in Norway that I was delivering 5,000 flies a year to.
To be doing that amount of work, you have to be organized.
Yes,
And I'm very organized. And my God, you put me in the happening place. I'd recommend anybody to go onto the Featherbender YouTube channel, and you have a
Yeah.
video where you show your tying room
Yeah.
up in the
Yeah.
attic. Oh
Mm.
man, I was impressed. Now that's organization to a different degree.
when I'm doing articles for magazines, they all want different flies. Yesterday, I did a fly for an American magazine that had to be a European saltwater fly. And uh, yesterday afternoon, I had to do an article about Coq de Lion or Galop de Lion. Uh, and the day before, I was doing snowshoe. And today, I've been tying this morning 2 dozen leggy bibios. So, and if I don't put my material away when I get asked to do something and I can't find something, it's just, oh, I waste so much time going through all the boxes trying to find shit that
Yeah.
it's not worth it. So I do a big tidy up at the end of every day's work and put everything back where it should be, hooks and everything.
Just on a side note, there you just mentioned it there, Barry. Magazines. I mean, like you mentioned it there, how you could see it happening and how you went to onto the digital media yourself. But they still exist. I mean, but the numbers are far fewer now. And I don't know.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
they've disappeared. So many of the magazines that I used to, uh, I I used to do a piece every single month for over 20 years for a German magazine. That's gone now. And the price of what your payment that you get has also
yeah, yeah, that's
dived.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
There was a golden age, wasn't there?
there certainly was, especially here in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Uh, you actually got paid well for articles.
Mm.
And there's still, I have a feature article in Fly Tire magazine in the US every single issue, uh, and that still pays well. Uh, but there are. I still work for one of the German magazines. I do stuff in the UK for fly culture. Uh, I did a piece the other month for trout and salmon. So there are still a few magazines that I do stuff for, and I do stuff for online magazines. So, but that's a very small part. And now, uh, before when I made an article, I would have to get it published at least 3 times for it to pay for itself. So I'd send it perhaps to Germany, to the US, to Australia or New Zealand or Japan, just to generate more income. So and of course I was using film, which was I did 3 weeks in the Amazon with Malcolm Greenhalgh.
Right.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I came back from the Amazon with 120 rolls of Ektachrome film. It's 10 quid a roll to buy, and then it was 10 quid a roll to process. So I had to make money out of that.
Speaking of return of investment, it's always the talking point with digital. People aren't willing to pay for stuff online generally. So in terms of the YouTube channel, the amount of work that goes into it, is it really a case of, and I suppose I'm thinking of this in terms of, say, maybe fly tires are wanting to build their career. It's almost seen as you have to have a good YouTube channel, but trying to make a return on investment on that takes a couple of years, I'm pretty sure, does it, in terms of building an audience?
I've been doing it now. I think I've been doing it for 8 years,
Uh,
the YouTube channel. But what has turned that around for me is the last 4 books have QR codes for every pattern. And my most recent Norwegian book has 100 patterns step by step, so 100 QR codes. And that's been published. It's been published in Norwegian. It's been published in May in Danish. So that's another few thousand readers that are going to be coming into the channel using the QR codes. My book came out on the 13th of February in the United States. On the 11th of February, it came out in Japanese. So it's all that generates traffic to my website and to my YouTube channel.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that the old world of books is still linking back to YouTube and vice versa. And I think that's the kind of secret to it, that if you can kind of link them all together, that they'll, it's a symbiotic kind of relationship.
Sure, but it's interesting. I had an American friend, a good fly tyer, John DeMuth, visiting me last year. And he was looking through one of my books, and he looked at an image and he put his fingers on it and went like that.
Yeah.
And he tried to open the image in the book. And that would just be fantastic. We've come so far in this world now.
Well, we talk about your new book anyway, Barry, The Featherbender's Advanced Fly Tying Techniques. Take us through, obviously, you have 16 previous ones, but why write this one?
Well, as with the videos, you can learn stuff. There's only so much I can put in a video. If I'm going to explain everything with regards to materials, hooks, techniques, the limitations of materials, the advantages of using certain materials, it'd be a feature film every video. I know from reading analytics that even if you're interested in a subject, there are very, very few people that view the videos for their entirety. They scroll through and zoom out, and but in a book you can explain that, and it's there constantly. And if they want to read it, they can, and they can get a much better insight. And it's like anything, you have to, if you're going to master a craft, you have to know your materials. It's like in anything, painting, sculpture, you have to know what your materials are capable of and where they stop being useful, what you can use them for and what you can't use them for. And this is something that I constantly try to explain when I'm doing fly tying courses, that the basic techniques are very quickly, once you've mastered them, they become the advanced techniques. But you have to be willing to master them. And it's very easy if you follow some simple rules. And there's very few fly tyers I see using wax. There's very few fly tyers using thread control, even fly tyers that have been tying all their lives. And once you master these basic elementary techniques, they become very quickly the advanced techniques, and you can do anything with fly tying.
Yeah, I think you can. And I have to say, Barry, I think you really get that across in the book. I have to say, and I'll say that to you here now, because I haven't had a good chance to go through the latest one, all of it, but it just reminded me the way you do, in a way, simplify the advanced techniques for people, and I think that's really important. Now, another thing there, and I noticed when I was going through the book, I fell down a rabbit hole. We talk about rabbit holes a lot on this podcast. One of the rabbit holes I fell into was tying thread, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing, and the structure and where they're from. And it was originally because I was looking for, I was trying to source an old spool of Danville's, okay, I used to use for a fly. And anyway, 3 hours later, on the internet, I ended up reading on about the construction and materials that are used for it. And then when I was just reading one of the flies in your book there, and you just mentioned, and don't forget to spin the bobbin anti-clockwise to flatten the thread.
Yeah.
And you've done that in a couple of things. I just go, yeah, and you know what? Okay, advanced technique, but really simple. you
Yes,
know?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
there's so many things you can use that technique for.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
100 things you can use that technique for.
Yeah.
Spinning it clockwise or anti-clockwise.
Yeah. Really good.
And it's kind of caught on because I see more and more fly tyers using it now.
And another thing you mentioned there, a simple one, is the wax. And I love the bit you have in this book. Won't let it all out, but a bit of a spoiler alert. During the storm here, we lost a big pine tree the other side of my garden.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ingredients of your wax is I'll now have it. So
Very good.
I'm looking forward to making it. And for anybody else, if you get the book, the recipe is in it. So I'm looking forward to that. But wax was another thing, and I picked up on that a while back. I used to, like, for example, and I go to a fly time problem here. When I was tying dabblers a lot, uh, problem I had with dabblers, and I now also realize I should have also flattened the thread. Okay. But when I would go to tie on the knot, my bronze mallard wasn't secure
Yeah.
and I was losing it, right?
Yeah.
I was losing, particularly when I tied the fly on, lovely head in it. So what has counteracted, what has solved that for me, first of all, was wax. And the wax,
Absolutely.
yeah. And it's just a simple thing. It secures the bronze mallard in. But now I'm looking, I said, geez, could have saved on wax, could have saved that old pine tree if I flattened the thread and spun the bobbin.
Yeah.
I love the way you say that because it's the simple things that are advanced sometimes.
Yeah, but you have to know how.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is knowledge that is gained only from loads of tying and loads of
Loads
years
of time.
of doing it. And
Yeah.
watching, the other thing is that I get so much from is watching other tyers.
Mm.
We all have special techniques and ways of doing stuff. And even, I mean, people that have only been tying a couple of years, I still learn from. That's really important. I love watching other tyers do stuff.
Is that why the fairs are so good, important as a kind of coming together? And you see it, people can just sit there or stand there and just watch.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if any of your listeners don't do fly fairs and they enjoy fly tying, they should absolutely try and go to a good one because there is so much to see and so much to learn.
Just on the flight time, actually, Tom. Just I'm not a flight tire, Barry. But for any advice, any good advice for people starting out, wanting to develop their career to just starting it, or any good tips and advice for people?
Go to a good class or get a good book. My beginner's book, I've chosen 12 flies. They're all international fishing flies. They'll catch trout anywhere in the world. Anywhere there is trout, they will catch them. And I've covered just about all the basic flies, from midges to caddis flies to a streamer, in these 12 patterns. But why I've also chosen these 12 patterns is that they all show you different techniques and they teach you different techniques. And once again, you've mastered these techniques, you can basically go on to tie any trout fly.
Are you better off concentrating on, like, say, one fly, just perfect that before
Oh,
moving on?
in the beginner's book, I say start off with the easiest pattern, which is a midge pooper, zebra midge. And it's important to observe proportions and distances
Yeah.
when you start tying. And if you ignore that and you tie a lot of flies, it's very difficult to get out of that. It's like
Yeah.
learning to drive a car with 2 feet on the pedals all the time. It's difficult to get out of that habit again. So I suggest that they tie a dozen of each pattern. And what Ord have done very cleverly is they've made a full tying kit with all the materials for the book, for the beginner's book, that gives you the opportunity to tie a dozen of each pattern. All the hooks are there and everything that you need for every fly in the book. And if you master that simple midge pooper, and there's only like 5, it's a tying thread body, a bead head, a peacock herl thorax, and 5 or 6 turns of rib with silver wire. That is it. But if you want that to look great and get it the same for every pattern, you have to practice it. And if you do a dozen, you pretty much mastered that. And then I go through increasing the level of dexterity and needed with each pattern throughout the book as you get further in. So that's a good way to start. I know, of course, again, all the patterns have a QR code.
Moving to this book, Barry, this
Yeah.
one. Can I just say as well, I haven't read it all. I've gone through most of it. I have to say, I mean, even the simple patterns, and this is the thing I love, a simple pattern tied well is beautiful. And it really
Yes.
shows out. And coupled with your photography, which is excellent, because if it isn't perfect, the good photography will show it up. Right. So it has to be perfect. And some of the patterns there, I just pick up one there and I just marked it there. Your Clark's caddis fly. You know, there aren't a lot of
Yep.
materials in that, but it's just excellent. Just a beautiful pattern. So I just wanted to say that before I ask you this. Uh, anybody, I'd highly recommend anybody who's tying. I'd highly recommend the book to have a look at because it really is. I found it hard to put it down some of the times. I'm just the photography and your way of explaining things is fantastic, really good. But what I wanted to ask you, did you choose the patterns of this? There are 28 patterns. Did you choose them on account of techniques, or was there another reason for them?
The techniques are very important, hence the name of the book. And everything's easy when you know how, but you have to learn these techniques. And all the techniques are, once you've mastered them, you can carry them on to advance your fly tying in general to all other patterns. But they're all successful fishing flies. That's important. I mean, they're not all my patterns. I've chosen some patterns like the Panama because there are so many different techniques in it that are all great to learn. I mean, very few flies have so many techniques in it as that, with double hackle wing, palmed hackle,
Tippet tail.
tippet tail.
Yeah.
I mean, even that, I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw the technique I used for that. I've never seen anybody else use it, and it is so simple.
Well, I actually haven't looked at that because I just breezed through. I haven't read that, but I was looking at the pattern itself. So, oh God, that's
It
an
keeps
interesting one. Yeah.
every single fibre of tippet
Yeah.
in perfect position
Yeah.
and perfectly straight. And it's very easy to do, and you can get it right every single time if you use that technique. So it's got a forward partridge hackle, it's got a palmed hackle, it has a collar hackle, double wings, a rib, silk body. It's got a black tag. So there are so many techniques in that and it's a fabulous fishing fly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. There's a lot going on in it. All right.
in Hans van Klinken's new book, he also does a whole chapter on the Panama, which is, I mean, it's a fly that's not used anymore.
Yeah.
But it was so popular in the 20s and 30s that there was all the prisoners in several prisons in France were tying them for sale. They taught everybody how to tie them, and they still work. They still work. If you go back to the early roots of Norwegian fly fishing, all the flies looked like that. They were huge, like what they call buster flies, like toilet brushes. I mean, and the kind of hackle they used for those can't be found anymore.
Yeah.
It was like webby and big and heavy, and now it's all stiff and fine. And so that kind and these hackles just can't be found anymore. It's extraordinary because of like genetic breeding, and and if you're tying wet flies as you do, Tom, I find probably the most difficult thing is getting all the good quality hen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's, to be honest, yeah, it's always been tough for me getting proper hen capes. And there are a couple of color shades that I always needed in. But yeah, I have sourced them, but it's not easy because, you know, it's very easy to get a grade A grade saddle hackle, and you pay for it, right? Or grade
Sure.
A, yeah, okay, but good quality hen capes in proper colors,
Yeah.
harder to get.
It's the same with if you tie in the classic Catskill dries.
Yeah,
Uh, Spade hackles can't be found on capes anymore. I've got some old Meps capes that are, they're 35, nearly 40 years old, and they have the most magnificent spade hackles on them.
right.
But
Yeah,
they make beautiful Catskill tails. But after those are gone, I
they're
know
gone.
these modern genetic
Yeah.
capes, they just don't exist. The hackles are long and slender and thin and sparse. Uh,
Yeah, no good. No good.
no,
No.
For salmon fly tying, if you were wanting to get into that, don't start the way you did. My God, the classic. But is there, would you recommend trying to perfect the technique, say, with your beginner's book first before, or
absolutely. I mean, because everything there is the elementary techniques: thread control, applying dubbing, uh, handling feathers the correct way. Uh,
Mm.
these are the absolute elementary techniques, and I didn't really want to call it fly tying for beginners. And the Japanese that have just published the beginners book have called it, which I find is so much better. They've called it the basic techniques, and anybody, I really truly believe this. That most fly tyers, even if they've been tying for a long time, will learn stuff from it. I found that it kind of it made the market for the book smaller than it should be. But
Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot of fly ties that won't buy it because it's for beginners. But all the techniques there are
It's all about branding.
well worth that.
It's a bit like, all right, this is random, but a bit like in Italy, Diet Coke never sold. Men wouldn't buy Diet Coke. Yep, because they're not to buy something with diet on it.
Well, there you go.
It's all about it. What you can understand. I'm not a beginner. I don't need that. Whereas, basic is nice. Yeah. Oh
Sure.
yeah. Actually, yeah. I'll just go over a few of the basic things.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like foundational, like, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
yeah. Actually, speaking of branding there, Tom, I have to say, Barry, the Feather Bender brand,
Oh
I think
yeah.
it's done brilliant. I just think, between the books, the website, the YouTube channel. It's just a nice way to do it. But it's interesting. Do you find it's an easier sell because it's not Barry Ord Clarke, it's the Featherbender, it becomes something more.
I wanted to brand it rather than just having my name because nobody knows who I am. But if it was related to fly tying uh, in general, it'd work much better. And I don't like putting music on anything that I do either.
Yeah.
Mm.
I find that is just so distracting. And so many videos, especially when they decide to put some kind of black metal thrash stuff on them
You're not going moshing in the pit then, Barry, no.
for a tiny pipe. I can't be doing with that. Not now.
We ask our guest a final question, and this might be putting you on the spot. We ask every guest for their most memorable fish on the fly. Do you have one?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do. Uh, it was in northern Quebec, fishing for sea run Arctic char. And it was a combination trip, but I was hunting black bear and caribou and fishing for these Arctic char. And the first night we arrived at this, it's a cabin in the middle. We've flown in with a seaplane and dropped off for 10 days. And you don't see anybody for 10 days, absolutely nobody. But the cabin that we were dropped off at had been totally vandalized by a black bear in the winter. So yeah, and it ripped everything out, absolutely everything. So I stayed at the cabin while my mate Jon went out fishing the first evening, and I was trying to get stuff together, organise my camera gear and my hunting gear and everything. And when he came back, he said, "I've just had the fish of a lifetime on." And I played it for like 25 minutes and lost it. And on the last day, I hooked a fish. And it took me down to, I think I had about 3 feet of backing left on my reel. And I had 120 meters of backing plus the fly line. And it was in a lake. But these lakes are connected with small streams that eventually come out to the sea. So the Arctic char come from the sea and they come up inland and spawn in these short rivers. And I landed it, and it was a little under 20 pounds on a 6-weight rod.
Oh my God.
And when I landed it, there was a Czech nymph in its dorsal fin.
Okay.
And I got back. My mate was fishing on the other side, and when I got round to him, I took him there, and I said, "Look, that fish had that in its dorsal fin." He said, "That's my fly from the
Oh,
Oh my God.
So he'd hooked it in the dorsal fin on the first night. That's why he couldn't land it.
Oh my God. What fly? Was it your own fly you caught him on, Barry?
It was a size 10 Gammarus. And when these fish were there and they were very spooky. They were in shallow water, and if you pulled the streamer in front of them, it just frightened them. So we had to go and fish really small flies.
It's been brilliant chatting to you. I'd highly recommend, obviously your new book is The Featherbenders Advanced Flying Techniques. You've got The Featherbenders Fly Tying Techniques, and then if you are starting out, to also check out Fly Tying for Beginners. That's all. They're all on Amazon, Barry. They're also on your website. You can find out more about them on
They're all available. If possible, try and get them from a tackle shop.
Yep.
Support your tackle shop instead of the mega shop Amazon.
Yeah.
right,
Sure.
yeah.
And they're all available from Merlin Unwin Books in the UK and Skyhorse Books in the United States and Flybito in Japan.
Brilliant. Well, we'd recommend everybody check them out, and also your YouTube channel, at the Featherbender as well, for that. Like I said, even if you're not into fly tying, just check out Barry's fly tying route. It's just brilliant.
Yeah,
It's something to admire. Barry, thanks a million for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and
Thanks, seeing you.
yeah, we might see you at some of the fairs sometime. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to come and fish with Tom soon.
Yep.
Oh, sure. Jesus, there'll be plenty of stories to tell then.
There will actually, yeah. That's going to happen, which is going to be great. So we're looking forward to that.
Thanks a million, Barry.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Our thanks to Barry for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.